I started the live streaming on YouTube. Yeah, I'm trying to move on to the LinkedIn now. I started the live streaming on YouTube. Okay. What did you say? I'm just watching on my end here. Tracy, you not joined the meeting. Can you try joining? Let me see if it. Have you joined? What did you say? Let me see if I can. I can't find make co-host option here. I can't find make make co-host. I can't find the option here. Yes, I can find her. I can't find the co-host option here. I can't find make co-host. I can't find the option here. Yes, I can find her. I can't find the Hi, Becky. Yeah. Can I try promoting you to panelists to see if it will work? Hi, Becky. So what do you do? Yeah. Can I try promoting you to panelists to see if it will work? You won't work now. Yeah. Hi, Becky. So what do you do? Yeah. Can I try promoting you to panelists to see if it will work?
Becky. Hello, Becky. Can you hear me? It's Susan. Hello? Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar Unpacking the NERC Draft Net Billing Regulation. Thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. We'll just go straight to the agenda. You're welcome. Today we'll be talking about a very timely regulation and unpacking the provisions and its implications for the Nigerian electricity sector. We have representatives from NERC. We have industry experts also coming to shed light on how this regulation will promote renewable energy integration and distributed renewable energy within the Nigerian electricity market. I'll start off with introducing the panelists who are with us. My name is Ivia Hamo. I'm the Academy Director of Electricity Lawyer Academy and also the founder of Electricity Lawyer. So I'll go ahead to introduce our panelists. We have with us from NERC, we have Dr. Yusuf Ali, who is ably represented by the Assistant Director, Engineer Umar Mohammed, and he'll be representing Dr. Yusuf Ali, who is the Commissioner for Research and Data Analytics at NERC. We also have with us Rahila Thomas. Rahila Thomas is an accomplished power sector expert with over 20 years of combined public and private sector experience across Nigeria's electricity industry. She's the country director of AMRC Nigeria, where she provides strategic advisory on transactions, market analysis, tariff design, and policy reforms. Rahila has played a pivotal role in Nigeria's power sector, stemming back to pre-privatization and even up until the drafting of the Electricity Act of 2023. She also served as the chairperson of the NERC-appointed Board of Kaduna Electric, and her career spans across various roles from the BPE, Bureau of Public Enterprises, to the Presidential Task Force on Power, and she has advised several ministers of power. She holds a BSc in Business Administration and an MSc in Energy Finance. So welcome, Rahila Thomas. We're happy to have you here. I'll then introduce Engineer Chibueze Eke. Engineer Chibueze is the Chief Executive Officer of Sea Solar, a leading Nigerian solar energy solutions company advancing clean, inclusive, and climate-resilient infrastructure. Chibueze has over 15 years of experience in energy, finance, and infrastructure, and his career has ranged across multiple international organizations, ranging from Merrill Lynch in America, Owando, Wood Mackenzie, Alcatel Lucent, and FCMB. He has also advised on national level projects, including the Presidential Power Initiative with Siemens, and he holds advanced degrees in engineering and energy finance from Cornell University and the University of Dundee, and he is a current certified engineer. Welcome, Engineer Chibueze. We're happy to have you here with us. So we'll move
Thank
on.
you, Ivia.
Thank you, Chibueze. We'll move on to just take a brief presentation from us at Electricity Law Academy before we then dive into the regulation. Luckily, Rahila has done a beautiful work of, she will be presenting regarding the regulation. So I will be skipping through a lot of the slides I had prepared because most of it, Rahila will be speaking to most of the point, but just to provide some form of context into what we'll be discussing today, I would share my screen right now. Please, can you confirm, Chibueze, sorry, can you confirm if you can see my screen? All right, so my screen is currently being shared. I'll move it to slideshow. So I'll just introduce Electricity Law Academy and then move straight into the discussions for today. Electricity Law Academy is an EdTech and knowledge exchange provider. We're equipping the next generation of energy lawyers and regulatory professionals. We provide several services, including executive training, curriculum development, coaching and mentoring, capacity building, like what we're doing today, and a lot of other services which you can find on our website. Some of the training courses and programs we offer are also listed on our website, where we have, for example, the Climate Law and Sustainability Pathways Program, which is a clean energy leadership program. And we're actually starting that at the end of this month. Introduction to Electricity Law and Regulation, understanding PPAs and other contractual frameworks, and other services are listed on the website. I'll go straight to why we're here, unpacking the net billing regulation. Just to give a bit of context, net billing is essentially a credit-based electricity compensation model that allows customers who are known as prosumers who generate their own renewable electricity to export surplus power back to the grid, and they receive monetary credits on their electricity bill. So essentially, you export your surplus power to the grid and you get monetary credits. You don't get your credit in kilowatt hours, you get it in monetary value, which is then offset against your bill. And this is different from the net metering model, which some of my slides speak to, which is essentially a one-for-one energy credit model, as opposed to the net billing model, where energy is imported from the grid, you are charged at the retail tariff, and energy is exported to the grid and charged at a different, usually the tariffs are lower, and Rahila will be speaking to that today. So essentially, you sell power at one price and then you buy at another, and then your bill reflects the net monetary difference. It's important to state it reflects the monetary difference, not the energy difference. So for example, if you import 500 kilowatt hours at 150 naira per kilowatt hour, your bill will be 75,000. And then if you export 200 kilowatt hours at 65, which is a lower tariff, your credit on that will be 13,000. So the difference between that 75,000 and the 13,000 is is a net payment, and the disco would retain that difference as a grid recovery cost, while for the prosumer you get a fair value for your money. And then some of the countries that use net billing, which Raila will speak to, so I'll skip that. And like I said, the net metering model is an energy credit model, and you're credited in energy units at the same retail rate. So remember, for the net billing, the rates are different. The amount you import is at the retail rate, but the amount you export is at a reduced rate, which Raila will be explaining to us. Some countries that are using or transitioning from net metering model, we would also share the slides afterwards, and this is essentially showing what the difference is. So net billing offers fiscal transparency, while net metering provides greater direct benefit. Because I have a lot of people asking, why did we adopt this model instead of the net metering model? And that's another thing Raila will be explaining to us alongside our NERC representative and Chibueze. So in the context of Nigeria, where we are now, like I said, the regulation provides for export, which earns injected energy tariff. Imports are billed at the regular end-use tariff. The credits can be carried forward indefinitely or transferred, and the discos are required to open an escrow ledger account for transparency purposes. There's a capacity limit between 50 kilowatts to 5 megawatts peak per user, and then the total that can be injected to the discos network is capped at 30% of the feeder load. It will be interesting to hear from NERC how this will impact on the general grid capacity limitations. So essentially the approach and the regulation seeks to foster distributed renewables, maintain the financial health of discos, and prevent grid instability. It also opens up opportunities for renewable energy developers, which Engineer Chiboze will be speaking to us about today. So net billing, in essence, preserves financial viability and grid stability for the discos, and for the customers, it provides compensation, although not fair compensation, that rewards self-generation without undermining the discos. So now we'll move forward to hearing from our discussants, and I will start the discussion sessions. So I would start with our representative from NERC, who is with us. Please, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, good afternoon. I can hear you very well.
Good afternoon. Thank you for availing us with your presence and your valuable insights. So I'll just move on to some of the issues which possibly stem up. I've spoken about the net billing and net metering framework, but it will be interesting to know why the net billing model was adopted for the context of Nigeria, because of course you have to look at the dynamics of each country's power sector and adapt it accordingly. So can you shed some light as to why the net billing framework was adopted for Nigeria by the regulator? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you have said, we're happy to be here to share some of the insights on the net billing regulation. But I also want participants to know that the net billing regulation is still a draft. It has not yet been approved by the Commission and is in the process of consultation. In fact, we held a consultation in Lagos on Friday, and we're going to hold another one tomorrow at Transcorp Hilton. Basically, if you look at the differences, as you have said, you have explained it very nicely. The purpose of the difference between net billing and net metering regulation is basically on how the expected energy is valued. For the first one, net billing, which we adopted, is based on credit, where credit exported in kilowatts for net metering is 1-on-1. So usually against import is retail. For instance, if you're on a band A in Nigeria and you buy energy at 209, most likely for net metering, you also be able to sell your energy at 209. But for net billing, credit export are a defined export price, which is usually lower than the retail tariff. And the prosumer is paid or credited for export at that export tariff. And he still has to, whatever power that he buys or imports is at the retail tariff that has been approved by the Commission, as I've said, for band A, band B, band C, whatever it is. Basically, the net effect is that there is a lower per kilowatts compensation for exported energy under the net billing compared to the net metering. But it also provides clearer accounting and fewer cross-subsidy problems. As you are aware, Nigeria, we are still under the subsidy regime. And having net metering might also have that problems with cross subsidy. The benefits are basically that it enables monetization, though not in the sense that you are giving Naira. I think that the way the net billing regulation is based on credit. So if, for instance, you buy at the retail tariff of 209 Naira and you sell, for instance, just for discussion purposes, at maybe 150 Naira. So what they do, there will be a net off at the end of the day. If the energy that you have sold is higher than more than what you have bought from the distribution company, then there is a net credit for you, which will be moved over to the next billing period. If, however, what you have consumed is higher than what you have exported, then there will be a net fee that you are supposed to, the net tariff that you are supposed to pay to the disco. Basically, we adopted this net billing on two or three principles. The first principle is that even at developed countries, they are basically moving away from net metering to net billing. I think over 20 states in America now have moved from net billing from net metering to net billing regime. And the fact that it provides better control for the disco. It reduces the exposure for the distribution company, and it makes it more likely that the disco will be willing to adopt that net billing rather than net metering regulation. So these are some of the reasons why the Commission also adopted the net billing regulation as opposed to net metering regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insight. Speaking about the discos, now the regulation provides that they are to maintain an escrow account for the prosumer credits that are received. Now, how would what administrative challenges do you see? Because we all know the current operational challenges that the discos are experiencing, and adding another layer onto it. What administrative challenges do you foresee that could arise, and how would NERC ensure transparency and timely settlement? Because we know that timely settlement is a critical issue in the industry. So how would NERC address that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you once again. There are basically maybe 4 or 5 challenges that we have looked at and also had discussions in the process of developing the regulation. The first one is accounting integration, because the discourse must integrate the escrow ledgers with their billing systems, and because also the fact that the net billing requirements is that you have a smart meter. So to reconcile the export and the export, that is the first challenge, accounting integration. There's also the problem of liquidity management and cash flow. Discourse will need to process and hold, and also be able to disburse this credit while ensuring solvency and compliance with the rules and regulations of the Commission. But the regulation has also proposed that those credits it will expire after 1 year. Then there's also coordination with market settlement agents for settlement across multiple markets. As you know, today there's a settlement market for the entire NERC. So there also needs to be that coordination, which is also might be a challenge. The other one is their operational capacity. What is the IT back end and the settlement back end for the discos, which in most cases we think that it might need an upgrade, and also training for them to understand how this process works. The next one is that we also, as you have rightly stated, prosumers need clear monthly statement and on time, and which should also be accessible in the event that there are disputes. So these are the key challenges that we have identified in the process of implementation. One of the ways that we're thinking of is to have a standardized monthly prosumer statements that shows what is your consumption, what is your import, and what is your export. I think there is a draft template in the regulation. And one thing we're thinking of is how to automate this process, because then if it's going to be manual, the timeline is going to be much longer than we expect. So if it is automated, then basically I think that within 2-3 days, they should be able to have their bills. Another one is, which you have also alluded to, is the settlement time. For now, the Commission has not provided any settlement time, but we have said that the settlement time should be monthly, but then we need to provide a clear timeline within which, within 10 days, within 15 days, you have to do that settlement. And number of days, we have to provide clear number of days so that when prosumers don't see the settlement, they know that the time has expired and they can be able to raise questions with the DISCO. And possibly there are already penalties in several of our regulations for late settlement. We will ensure that those penalties are also implemented in the event of the DISCOs not reconciling and settling on time. Then we have also provided audits where we need to audit the transactions on a regular basis. We're provided annually, but these things can also be done on a quarterly basis or even on a monthly basis if it is automated. Because if you have an automated system, then it's much more easier to audit thousands, possibly in the next few years, having millions of transactions. The idea is for the commission to automate the whole system. Then we think that there's also going to be some pilot phase of implementation with some DISCOs that already have an advanced IT systems so that we can see what are the lessons learned and how can these things can be tweaked. Having a standard API for metadata exchange between the commission already now on all band A feeders, and in fact all feeders, the commission has an API standard where we already receive data. So it's just to upgrade it and include the fact that also with net billing that should be done. These are some of the ways that we think we will be able to mitigate those challenges. But as you know, ultimately, it depends on how the implementation pans out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a lot of sub-questions flowing from some of these challenges you mentioned. I'm happy to hear that you mentioned automation, which is really the way forward in managing the reporting. In fact, NERC should be looking at self-reporting for the DISCOs to maybe create a platform where they can go and self-report, and that platform sort of aggregates the information and saves time. I'm sure Raila and the MRC team can come up with something in that regard. Now, stemming from what you've said, because a lot of issues were just ringing in my head. First of all, in terms of the smart metering, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that cybersecurity and data privacy are embedded in the new smart metering systems? Because that is also a big issue.
Yeah, thank you once again. As we're all aware that smart metering and a two-way communication naturally will introduce cybersecurity and personal data risks. It will show customer consumption patterns, which are personal data. The draft references metadata and monitoring obligations. And as you are aware, in Nigeria now, every institution or every organization is also supposed to adhere to the data protection regulations of the country. So one of the ways that we intend to upgrade the regulation after the consultation is also to include clauses that are already provided in the data protection regulation and what is the process. Basically, I think that if the markets, if the DISCOs, if the consumers also adhere to the cybersecurity and data protection acts of the country, we might not have significant issues. There are also requirements for incident reporting and service levels agreement. There's going to be third-party access controls. So there's going to be strict rules for instance, third-party aggregators. When that happens, vendors and service providers, there's also going to be serious, as you're aware, if you have looked at how the commission introduced their regulations. For instance, I'll just give an example with the mini grid regulation, where there were a series of trainings for not just the developers, for consumers, for financiers, even for other government agencies that are supposed to collaborate with us in that process. So that will also happen once the regulation has been passed. People are supposed to understand what is the minimum requirements, how are their data protected, and basically following the rules that is already provided for in the country.
Thank you very much. I think that's really key, to work with existing agencies instead of reinventing the wheel. So don't need to reinvent the wheel. Work with the agencies who are already providing, and there's already a data need that is there. So
yes,
it'll be good for the commission to work with them. So just to also stemming from that particular issue you raised in terms of the possible challenges and how the commission is looking to address same. How would NERC and DISCOs manage grid capacity limitations, especially in areas where you have high prosumer penetration, to ensure stability? And how will enforcement of technical standards be balanced with the operational realities of the DISCOs?
Yeah, thank you once again. As you're aware, we are also aware that high prosumer penetration can create reverse flows, voltage regulations, and protection coordination issues. That has already been, in a way, taken care of because the draft requires a technical feasibility study, and it has also set technical standards for interconnection. If you look at the schedules, you will see their requirements for interconnection. The studies basically is to identify what are the constraints and required upgrades before approval. That is what is supposed to be done. There's supposed to be technical feasibility stroke, maybe hosting capacity studies, where before approvals, there are limits that have been provided. So we use these limits to ensure that the technical standards in the NERC is adhered to. There are export caps. If you look at the regulations, it's provided for that at least up to 30% of the feeder normal capacity. Then we're also aware that in the country today, there might be some feeders that will be constrained. Is within the DISCO to temporarily limit exports until that feeder has been upgraded. There's going to be automatic curtailment during stress. And this is basically done in many jurisdictions. Where either net billing or net metering is also implemented. And then, as you are aware, that most of the inverters today, or the inverters that are required to be connected to the grid, has to be smart inverters, and possibility of telemetry, which requires grid support functions like frequency, voltage, right through reactive supports. And basically, there's also going to be telemetry for larger prosumers, where you have consumers above maybe 1 megawatts, 2 megawatts, 500 kilowatts. That is going to be provided. I think sometimes last 3 months, there was a training of all the DISCOs by NISO on telemetry, basically just to ensure that that will be enforced going forward. Then coordination on standards and enforcement. There's supposed to be balanced technical standards with the DISCOs, and they also have to have the ability to implement. We think that at the initial stage, there's going to be a first compliance. The mandatory studies, as I've said, is provided, and there's also be cost recovery mechanisms for necessary network upgrades, because ordinarily a DISCO will not upgrade its network, except it's also going to recover whatever cost that it has spent. Then the regulation has also provided clear cost allocation rules, where what is the rule of the prosumer, what cost is supposed to be incurred by the prosumer, and what cost is supposed to be incurred by the disco, and what cost will be shared, whatever, if that is required. So I think that in a way will reduce disputes and provide the necessary investment signals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. So how do you think, just as an offshoot, how would the regulation balance the financial viability? Because you mentioned a few mechanisms that will be put in place. How will that be balanced against incentives for renewable energy prosumers alongside the need to keep discos financially viable and consumers reliably supplied?
I think the main thing is that you look at it as a prosumer. I have 50 kilowatts, and what I am consuming at the end of the day is maybe like 30 kilowatts. But I've already invested on 50 kilowatts. So there are two things that happen. There's one thing that is happening today. That 20 kilowatts, if it is ever generated, is wasted because you are not using it. Maybe except you have a battery, even if you have a battery that is above that 50 kilowatts, because you only use 30 kilowatts, that 20 kilowatts at the end of the day is wasted. So the regulation is basically saying instead of wasting that energy, somebody is willing to buy it off you at a price. And because the price is also in perpetuity, there is no time to say, okay, your system today, I'm only buying it for 5 years, I'm buying it for 2 years. As far as your system is working, the technical standards are okay, you will continue to sell to the disco. And whenever there is a review in tariffs, if the tariffs go up, your tariff will also be reviewed. If the tariff goes down, you also be reviewed downward based on the parameters that have been set. So, and because it's a lower export price, it protects the disco's revenue. But yes, we agree that if you compare it with net metering, it reduces the prosumer returns. But then if you look at it from the aspect of the net metering, the disco might not be willing to take up the power, because then if I take up the power at the same price that I'm selling it to you, who am I going to sell the power to? So these are some of the things that there's going to be a trade-off, basically. But the fact that it's the lower price and is energy that ordinarily wouldn't have had any value to you, wouldn't have had any profit or any price. Somebody is now saying, I'm going to take that energy at a price. So it balances it. The disco now has the upgrade its system to sell at a place of need. You understand? So the disco takes the balance between the lower price that is selling to you and the tariff price and the approved tariff for the disco. And you, from zero, you are also selling it at a price. So I think this is the mechanism for ensuring financial sustainability, both for the disco, but as well as the prosumer.
Thank you very much. Just in terms of administrative compliance from NERC, how would the Commission and so what tools and mechanisms would the Commission put in place to ensure compliance with particularly the regulation in its entirety, but also relating to monitoring and dispute resolution?
Yeah, basically a lot of people might look at it and see there's a regulation, but there's only about 3 or 4 lines on dispute resolution or monitoring, and they wonder why. What is happening is that the Commission has a separate regulation for dispute resolution and for monitoring, which takes care of not just net billing regulation, but all our regulations and all the processes, how we monitor it. So you might see there are only 3 or 4 lines, but that is not the idea. There are other regulations. If you go to our website, you will see that regulation on dispute resolution. But basically, what the Commission intends to provide is standardized metadata through APIs or through IoTs, that is Internet of Things meters, and there's going to be a mandatory monthly settlement, which you have also spoken about. The idea is that we are looking at, after the regulation has been passed, we are looking at having a centralized registry or a reporting portal. In fact, what the Commission is proposing to have a single portal where the prosumer will apply, where the DISCO will give approval, where NEMSA will also certify, and where the Commission will also approve it. We also have a monitoring complete system. So it's going to be a complete reporting portal, which will provide regular updates to the markets and also Nigerians in general, to lawyers like you for research, for students that are going to do research, and also for will-be investors. So this data will be provided on a regular basis, maybe either some on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis for people to see. But I've also talked about automated reconciliation engine, where the DISCO's billing systems need to be updated to be able to reconcile this in automatically. There are also KPIs and mandatory reporting requirements, monthly, quarterly, yearly. We are provided in the regulation that the DISCOs are supposed to do public reporting on their website, where anybody can go and have access on that. There's also going to be, there's generally a dispute resolution, where at the first instance, the prosumer and the DISCO will sit down and try to resolve whatever dispute that they have. And where they are unable to resolve that dispute, then they come to the Commission. And in the event that they are unable to resolve the dispute, or the Commission is able to resolve the dispute, then they have access to the courts to resolve as a last resort of whatever dispute that they have. So I think that will strengthen, that has in a way provides a lot of comfort, or it will strengthen the regulation for both the prosumer, but as well as the DISCO. Not forgetting that the Commission plays a dual role of protecting the consumer, the prosumer, but also ensuring that the DISCOs get a fair return of their investment.
Thank you very much. That was very insightful. I think my last question for you for now is how do you think the regulation will impact state electricity market regulatory frameworks?
Sorry, can you ask the question
How
again?
would the regulation impact state electricity market regulatory frameworks? How would the regulation?
Yeah, thank you. If you have looked at the draft, or as I've said, if participants have studied the draft, it sets a national framework for net billing, but leaves the retail implementation details to distribution licensees and state regulators. The state regulators will have to interact. They are the main implementers of the regulation, but not forgetting that as of today, we have almost 20 states that have still not passed their electricity regulation bill. So for those states that have not passed their bill, it will still be managed by the Commission. But for states that already have their own electricity regulatory commissions, they will be implementing the regulation. They have an option of implementing the regulation as it is, or adopting the implementation as it is, or making some amendments. But we have had the discussion with some of the state regulators that came to the consultation in Lagos, and the idea is that there need to be alignment in the supply side rules. There need to be alignment in consumer protection. There need to be alignment in meter connection requirements, basically to avoid fragmentations. And but there's room, there's potential for variability, but we know that different states could apply different interconnection or settlement procedures, like we have seen is done in India. But the whole idea is we don't want for Nigeria, especially at this early stage, we try as much as possible to avoid investor or consumer confusion. If, for instance, you come to Abuja and it's a different rule, you go to Nasarawa, which is just 30 minutes from here, is a different rule. You go to Lagos, it's a different rule. Then it creates confusion for investors. We think that eventually we have seen interest in financial institutions also willing to finance prosumers to install net billing in their premises. So if there is confusion, if there is different rules, if there are different rules in different places, then it basically creates confusion. But from our discussions with the states, from the comments that we have seen from the states, I think that most states will adopt the regulation either as it is or with minor changes.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. Thank you for your contributions. We would still be coming back to you with
Yes, I'm available.
questions from the audience.
Thank you very much.
Potentially other speakers. So we'll now be moving on to Rahila Thomas, who will be taking us through the commercial aspects of the regulation. And I'll hand over to her. Over to you, Rahila. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy. Can you see my screen?
Yes, you just need to put it in PowerPoint.
Okay. Does that work?
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel discussion. I think I'll just get into it. Yourself and Umar have touched on a lot, but I felt that just to provide a much more holistic picture, we look at it from the two documents that are driving renewable integration, renewable energy integration in Nigeria. And of course, we have the policy document that was issued sometime in March, and we have the Electricity Act 2023 that was signed last in 2023. Now, both documents will, make robust provisions that are driving the need to integrate more renewable energy into the system. And one of those programs and provisions is the net metering we're talking about. And of course, on this very busy slide, you can see that there are different targets in the country that when you think about Vision 3030, it has targets. When you think about the race towards energy transition and to decarbonize the world, there are also targets. And then you have the NREP, NRIP, you have theirs funded by the World Bank. All these targets are towards integrating renewable energy. But the one I would like to narrow into is the micro renewable energy obligations. And that's because it sort of connects with the net billing program that is about to get started. NERC has issued renewable energy obligations to the distribution companies. So they ought to put in place embedded generation of 10% of what their load allocations are. And of that 10%, 5% will be from renewable, 50% will be from renewable energy sources. So obviously there is a positive outcome for the utilities in this case or incentive to adopt this program. Now, there are 5 key provisions in the draft regulation. Yourself and Omar have touched on all of them. There's the eligibility factor, which provides a bandwidth between 50 kilowatt peak and the 5 megawatt peak. And then, you have the fact that if you are a prosumer providing supply to the network, you are not, or you will be paying at the same rate that you have been paying, irrespective of your band. You pay the same tariff wherever you are for the energy you import for self-use, and for the exported energy, as you have said, and Umar has also corroborated, it's at a lower price, and there's a reason for that. The final provision there is for carbon credits. Like I said, we are all on a global race to net zero. So carbon credits is becoming, it's a tradable instrument. And the benefit of this program is that the prosumers will own the credits that arise from this system. So they're entitled to it, they can monetize it. So they are getting not only revenues from selling energy, but also the climate action related benefit, which you get through carbon credits. I think when you think about the capital cost that's required to put in such a system, I felt that it was important to look at it in this way. Using the least capacity requirement for you to join, you're looking at over 190 million naira to get.
Hello, Rahila, are you still there? I think we're having. Okay, Rahila is probably having some network issues, so she'll be joining back shortly. But while we're waiting for her to join back, we would probably move to Engineer Chibweze's session, and then when she comes back, we can move back to her. Okay, I think she's back. So yes,
I'm back.
she's back, yes.
Oh dear. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. My network just went down. Let me go back to my presentation. Okay, please let me know if you can see my slides. Can you see it?
Yes, you can see
All
it.
right.
If you just put it in PowerPoint. Thank you.
All right, that's fine. All right, apologies once again. Never know with the network. So what I was saying here is that at the 50 kilowatt peak capacity, which is the least or the minimum under the draft regulation that you can join this program, we are looking at a cost of 190 million. Now, obviously, that entry cost is prohibitive for a lot of customers. And when you look at the space that is required, we typically see it around industrial and commercial premises. I have seen comments and valid points being made that why is the bandwidth so restrictive? I mean, 50 kilowatts sort of knocks out a lot of customers from benefiting from the program. While that is a valid point, I think we need to see it from the flip side, the other side of the coin, which is it's a new program. It's never been done. You have a grid at the distribution end, which is not fully automated, which is not as robust and strong as it should be. And so when you're bringing it any sort of technicality, you have to sort of absorb it carefully. And when you look at the pricing, of course, it's you look at it from the view that the customers that are able to benefit from this would be, or able to key into this, would be the industrial and commercial customers. They are the ones that are credit worthy to secure such financing for a large capacity in this regard. And also, when you look at the fact that the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria today, I think they indicated that they use 30 to 40% of their OPEX to meet their energy needs. That begs for like a facility manager or facility system that ensures that everything is going right, not to disrupt their process. So with that in mind, it tells me that there's experience that comes with engaging customers at that level. They understand what contract is, they understand tariffs, they already understand technical requirements based on the fact that they are currently self-generating and providing their own supply. So this simplifies negotiations and reduces the customer support burden that would ideally come with dropping this band down to like 5 kilowatts. Can you imagine having to deal with 1,000 customers, 1 kilowatt, 3 kilowatts? It will be chaotic and can potentially even create a safety issue or a reliability issue at the distribution end for other customers who are not prosumers. So I think that there's a great argument for that, but I think that it's important that the system is allowed to sort of build experience over time. The utilities use this opportunity to build experience in a way that they can then have other customers join. So it's a great benefit to the discourse at the end of the day, but it has to be done methodically so it doesn't undermine their system. Now we're looking at the tariffs. Again, you've talked about this yourself and Umar, the injected energy tariff. The regulation speaks to using the fixed costs of the MITO hydro generation cost. Again, some have argued that, you know, there are two different energy sources. Why is that being pegged to the hydro cost? But at least the good thing about this is that, like Umar has said, it is still work in progress, and you needed to start somewhere. And then when you test it in the consultation process, you can then go back and think about whether there's other alternatives. But in my view, I think that this, to start with, it makes sense. It's predictable. You know where those costs are coming from. You can go back and you can go into the MITO and look at those costs, and you know exactly what you are getting. If you then the other alternative is for the prosumers to now come and defend their rates before the regulator, or having to open their books to it and talk about their system, how it's procured and all that. It will take quite a lot of time from the regulator, the utility negotiating this rate, and the prosumer needs to understand what it takes to actually go and defend its rate. So it will be time consuming. So from start to finish, it will take much more longer for prosumer to get onto the system if you want to pursue the open book style of defending what your rate should actually be. And then you have the interconnection cost for using the distribution network to have your energy supplied. The billing, obviously, you've talked about that. There will be an amount billed to the distribution licensees. There will be an amount billed to the prosumers, and when there's a net off, then there's either a credit or a debit. But in a situation whereby the prosumer exports more than it imports, then there's a credit that can be carried forward. So ultimately, I think that the issues around why is it that let me I think talk about this, the interconnection cost, because I'd mentioned it in the formula. Just for people to understand, when you talk about the interconnection cost, we are essentially speaking to the distribution use of system, as well as all the activities that the distribution company will be engaged in, from your application to the testing, verification, and commissioning of your system to join. The whole idea behind this is to ensure safety, reliability, and compliant integration with the grid, so that it does not compromise the grid in it as a whole, and of course affect supply to those that are not prosumers as well. So we talked about the compensation mechanism here, and you both discussed the difference, and I wouldn't get into it because you have talked about it, but I think the key thing between these two systems, which from my end is added to what Umar had discussed, is the fact that with the net billing, it creates equity amongst all players. So with the net metering, yes, the prosumer gets more, there's more benefit, but then it's not equitable because it also would discourage the distribution companies to actually uptake or participate or sort of promote the program because it's really on their table to make it work. So if in carrying out the net metering, the cost associated with maintaining and modernizing their network is not factored and they can't get it, then there's no incentive to actually uptake it. That incentives, you say that, well, on one hand, I need to meet my renewable energy obligations given to me by NERC. I also have underserved areas in my network, and I feel that the prosumer arrangement will support that. While those two are strong incentives, on the other hand, you have a disincentive, in my view, that might be stronger than the other two that make sense as well for you to uptake it. So I think the net billing mechanism provides the required equity. So you as a prosumer, you have an asset already sitting in your premise. You didn't know that you're going to be able to sell this to the grid. Now the opportunity has come. You can monetize some of that capacity that might be sitting idle and you don't get anything for it. And your recovery is even much longer if it is done in a business context. And then of course with the utility, with the net billing mechanism, you are able to recover your cost of maintaining your grid and ensuring that it's moving smoothly for the non-prosumers to benefit and carry on getting their supply with no hindrances. And then the grid itself has the opportunity to get the required revenues for investments to be made. So I think using this net metering, net billing methodology or approach compensates everybody. This is an example, you had an example, but essentially just saying that the 40 naira here, if we assume 100 naira retail tariff, 60 is energy, 40 is for the interconnection cost, which is a variable cost. If you go with the net metering methodology, therefore means the utility or the discos in this case will be overpaying with the 40 naira required for them to do their upgrade. The implication of this, obviously, is that they begin to have revenue shortfalls. And with revenue shortfalls, then your tariffs generally will have to go up to cover that shortfall in the future so that you are able to recover that OPEX shortfall that is happening as a result of this program. And obviously, your maintenance suffers, and those other customers in the network that are not prosumers might suffer from this because then they begin to have more load shedding, more technical issues on their network, more downtime, and we don't want that. So most certainly, in my view, for the regulator to have gone with the net billing method, it ensures that everybody is sorted. When you go into the table, it's a win-win for everybody. The utilities benefit, the prosumers benefit, the grid is better off, and we all go away from the table smiling. Then the last slide here is just speaking to to 3 countries I had selected because they have a similar design for their tariffs. So in Alberta, for example, it's the same thing with us here in the sense that their end user tariff, they discount the network charges. So in Alberta, their transmission costs, which here we call TOS, and their duos for the network charges is taken out of the end user tariff, multiplied by the measured, imported, exported energy, and then you have the credit there. So it's similar to us, and it reflects that in Alberta, all they want to be able to be paying for is the energy value. In Kenya, they kept it very simple. Just pay 50% as a prosumer, you pay 50% of your end user tariffs. And I can understand why Kenya may have taken that approach, because they just want to ensure that the system matures. It allows them to get more people into the pool, and at the same time sort of tweak the system, tweak the program to mirror what the market is saying. And I think that is what would happen here as well in Nigeria, that you never start with a perfect document. It's never perfect. But the idea is when you have something, then there should be the flexibility. The regulator should be flexible to be able to adapt, to be able to make the changes to reflect the market conditions. And the last country here is Brazil. In their case, it's the recovery of the grid cost is graduated, is progressive, and that is added onto their energy tariffs. And by 2030, for instance, all the prosumers will be paying fully for the grid cost. But again, this again was to encourage uptake. So you start at 100, where paying the full cost of the grid, or you're not going to pay full cost of the grid supply, I beg your pardon. In Brazil, by 2030, all the prosumers will be paying will be the tariff, the energy tariff, and not the cost of the grid. So that, of course, is a policy decision. Once it works out with all the evidence received that it's the best for the market, then the regulator does what the policy statements have stated. So that is it from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rahila, for that insightful presentation. So I have some questions stemming from your presentation. You mentioned the compensation mechanism, especially for the exported energy, which is below the retail compensation framework. Now, what practical challenges do you think prosumers may face if the compensation of exported energy is below retail rates, and how might this tariff structure affect the business models of prosumers and discos compared to, like you said, the one-for-one net metering framework? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivy. I'm so sorry. I'll need to turn off my camera for now so that I can stay. I think the network is having issues, but I hope I got to the end, which is talking about the Brazil. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All right. I'll just switch off my camera. Over to you, Evie. Thank you.
Okay, I asked the question. Let me repeat myself, probably because of your network. You spoke about the below retail compensation mechanism, and I said, what practical challenges do you think prosumers will face if the compensation for exported energy is below retail rates, and how might this tariff structure affect the business models of prosumers and discos compared to the one-for-one net metering framework, which you also alluded to? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about the below retail compensation, it just simply reflects the real world cost structure. So when you talk about the financial economic challenges, exported energy earns lower wholesale credits, while imported energy is billed at full retail rates, reducing savings and ROI. So obviously, which is the point I made, is that with the net billing mechanism, you don't get your return is not as high as it would be if you had the net metering method. The lower compensation also extends investment recovery timelines for PV systems. And also it encourages prosumers to use more energy on site, often by shifting usage to their daylight hours. However, what I would like us to understand is the logic behind this below retail pricing. Now, when we look at our energy tariffs today, our end user tariffs today, it's inverted. And I say inverted because the residential customers pay less than the industrial and commercial customers. So for example, if you as a commercial customer or industrial customer is connected at 330 or 132, which is the highest voltage, you have your cost, there's no business for your tariffs to include the other assets down the value chain to you and I as customers. So the tariffs that customers connected, for instance, at the voltage level of at 330 or 132, it should actually reflect the assets being used to supply them the power. And if you are the retail end or the customer end of the value chain, you will need the assets from 330 down to 132, down to 33, down to 11, then 415. So as a residential customer, if you were to pay the cost of actually having electricity supplied to you, then, it will have to be all those assets from the top to the bottom. But because of the inherent cross subsidies we have, that is not the case. So now with this program, I don't think the regulator should sort of bring in bad habits or a distortion to the markets. And it's important that it reflects the assets that will be used to provide that supply. So that is really the logic. You have your end user tariff. You are using the entire value system, the entire electricity value system to get your supply. But as an exporter of energy, you have no business getting the tariffs for the generation cost on the national grid. You have no business with the cost that would go for the wheeling charge for transmission. So really, the only cost that you should be taking is your supply costs, which is the energy itself you're providing, and the assets you are using. So that is really the reality of designing the tariffs here. So it's hard, sometimes it might be hard to understand, but in the real world, people want to pay for what they provide. People want to pay for what they get. And if I'm providing something, just pay me for that. I think that is how I see it. So the real challenge, I would say, is investors worry about unpredictability. If tariff setting formulas or review circles are unclear, it becomes difficult to forecast payback.
Rahela has just dropped off, but I'm sure she would come on shortly. She's back. She's back on.
Oh dear.
Rahela, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you, and I'm so sorry about this. Today is just one of those bad days. I really don't understand. I've changed to internet service providers, and I still have the same problem. So I think what I was saying is that I think the point to be raised is that most systems participating at the 50 kilowatt peak and 50 megawatt peak scale are businesses. They can model their investment returns using the injected energy tariff and are better equipped to treat the credits as part of an overall energy cost optimization strategy. So most times for businesses, they already have the system to self-generate to carry on with their businesses. And this opportunity has just created a way of getting revenue to, write off some of that capital they have already injected to provide their self-generation. So like I was saying before I went off, that the investors worry about unpredictability. So I think if tariff setting formulas are done, the formulas are clear, the review process is very clear, I think it reduces the anxiety or the lack of trust that investors will have in such a system. If it's predictable, then they can forecast their payback. That's why transparency, publishing the methodologies, review frequency, and reference benchmarks is what mitigates perceived risk. I think it's a win-win thing. The below retail compensation is not I won't see it as a challenge. I will see it as a true reflection of the cost of a prosumer supplying power into the distribution grid.
Thank you very much. And like you rightly said, it's about equity. I mean, you should bear the cost that is ascribable to you, because it wouldn't be fair to benefit from a cost that you have no business with, really. Like you rightly said. You spoke about predictability and transparency, which and Umar also alluded to and gave us detailed explanations on the mechanisms that NERC is putting in place. So given all these potential tariff fairness concerns, what would you recommend? How can NERC design a predictable mechanism that promotes prosumer participation while also ensuring long-term market stability?
Okay, thanks, Ibi. So I think for me, there are three things. Fairness begins with clarity. I think I alluded to that when I spoke earlier. The injected energy tariff should be based on a published formula. And I think the formula is already in the draft regulation bill. It's clear, it's very simple, anyone can understand it. So that's good. Once that methodology is transparent, stakeholders can understand and trust the numbers. I think the more information that is out there, the better. The other thing is predictability through fixed review circles. This is an important aspect of fairness. NERC could tie tariff reviews to fixed intervals, or there could be a provision where a prosumer would want to come and have a conversation around its costs using objective parameters, for example, inflation. So this helps both discos and prosumers to plan long term. So I think predictability through fixed review circles will be very helpful. And I think also digital disclosure. For example, I think Umar talked about a portal. I think that would be a great addition to boost investment confidence and predictability. The portal where he talked about having NEMSA, the prosumers, NERC, the utility, and I would ask that, CERC, the current state electricity regulatory commissions that have been established, I think they should also be part of this portal so that they begin to understand if really they want to adopt what already is national or they want to tweak it to suit their markets. But I think the important point here when you talk about the state regulation is the fact that this prosumer program is really at the distribution end of the business. So it's already within the state purview, so to speak. So I think for me, as a state, I would encourage that you adopt it once this is issued by NERC and let it just carry on because it's at the distribution end, which is under your mandate to develop. So all you need to do is to have a system where it's properly monitored, there are no distortions, it's clear, there are incentives that would perhaps bring in more to the pool. So for example, a state might feel that 50 kilowatt peak to 5 kilowatt peak, megawatt peak is too prohibitive. So they could drop the 50 kilowatt peak to maybe 10. So again, it's at the discretion of the state. But I think to enhance or improve predictability, the portal that NERC, which Umar spoke about, is a great one. And lastly, I would like to share that I read in the report, Ghana, for example, the Energy Commission has a net metering tariff tool that allows prospective prosumers to input system size, load data to see indicative tariffs and returns. So I think that is a great tool that they have there. And Nigeria could also adopt a similar digital model wherein there's a net billing tariff calculator in this case, hosted by NERC to help investors and prosumers understand potential payback periods before they actually install the system. I think for me, those are the three things really: standardizing methodology, predictability through fixed review circles, as well as incorporating a digital system for ease of absorption and understanding what the impact will be on the prosumer, even the utility, when you put in the right data into it. Thanks.
Thank you, Raila. That was very high level. I always like to look at things from the lens of equity and justice. So how do you feel, because let's go down to vulnerable households and consumers who may not have access to a portal, or what regulatory adjustments do you think are needed to ensure that the net billing remains transparent and equitable for all consumers, including vulnerable households?
Well, when you say vulnerable households, I believe that vulnerable households will not be part of this net billing mechanism. So if you are termed a vulnerable household, you are unlikely to access the funds required to put in a system as little as the 5 kilowatt peak. So in this situation, I wouldn't really bring those category of customers because they would have socialized costs. There will be those that will come under the lifeline tariff structure, for example. And right now, I know that the government is working on redesigning the subsidy so that it is even better targeted. So that said, in terms of the granularity of it, I think really it's about publishing information. Today, Nigeria, I think, I understand we have the highest presence on the internet. Everyone has one way or the other of getting on the internet. So for prosumers that have the capability or are eligible to provide supply to the distribution network at the level at which this draft regulation is now, I want to believe that those sort of prosumers will have access to the required technology, if it is provided by NERC for them to understand what is there for them, and how they can optimize the use of this program. So I really wouldn't talk about vulnerable customers in this case. The vulnerable customers in the network are those that would benefit from the supply that is coming. So if you're a vulnerable customer within the network that is underserved and the utility takes more prosumers to be able to augment, because this is augmenting the supply they have, then you as a vulnerable customer will have the benefits of having supply. So yeah, that's it really. I don't know if that answers your questions, but
that's very clear. That's very clear. Thank you for that. So speaking of prosumers, I know you mentioned you reeled out the cost component, and there's a connectivity charge. What will be the cost impact of the one-time connectivity charge on small-scale prosumers? And should NERC consider other frameworks, maybe like a tiered or waived rates? What's your opinion on that?
Okay, so the connectivity charge covers the reasonable and necessary cost incurred by the distribution network operator in what? Enabling, facilitating, or reinforcing the grid connection. So it's what you connect. It's the same thing as paying if you wanted to connect on the transmission, you pay a transmission connection charge. So it cannot be a one size fit all, and it will be different based on the sort of system you have on and the capacity and all that. If you look at Schedule 3B of the draft regulation, I think NERC has already provided a tiered structure for system sizes. So there are 4, I think, yes, and the schedule, there's from 50 kilowatt up to 100 kilowatt peak. And then the next tier is from 100 kilowatt to 500 kilowatt, 500 kilowatt to 1 megawatt. And then you have the last tier being 1 megawatt up to 5 megawatts. So given that the regulation applies to systems starting from 50 kilowatt peak, what that means, which is the point I've been saying, is that the bandwidth already is pointing to a certain type of customer category, and that in this case would be the commercial and industrial customers with stronger capital capacity. So for these type of customers, this category, obviously the charge will be proportionate to the infrastructure and the technical work required and shouldn't be a barrier. So NERC retains the authority of obviously to review these rates from time to time. So if market data shows that the charge is material and affects participation, it can be reviewed, it can be reduced. And if the inflation has created the need to increase the cost, then that can be adjusted. But I think the tiered approach is good. It's already in the draft. The question really is around how would that connectivity be priced. So I wouldn't want to preempt the regulator because we are working with them as well on this. So I would say that we wait for the regulator to come out with those rates, which I feel should be a reflection of the actual connectivity. So the assets you are connecting to, the capacity of that renewable energy system. These are all factors that should play in determining what that connectivity charge should be.
Thank you so much, Raila. I have one last question for you. You spoke about carbon credits, which is really important, as you rightly alluded to, in the global landscape, especially with carbon trading and cross-regional carbon trading that are currently ongoing. Since all carbon credits from renewable systems vest in the prosumer, how do you think this can be monetized in the local market, and what safeguards are needed to avoid the concentration of benefits among a few large players?
Okay, so carbon credits. The carbon market in Nigeria is still at a very early stage. The National Council on Climate Change will need to first develop a framework that defines how participants like prosumers can register, verify, and trade carbon credits locally. So for example, for you to be able to develop a market, you have demand and supply. You have to create a market that generates a supply and there's a demand for it. And that demand will come when the National Council on Climate Change and the entire machinery that is in place to support our climate action aspirations. You need to determine caps for different players in the market. So whether be industries, commercial, you need to be able to set what the emission limitation should be. So if I am capped at a certain level there and my emissions are higher than that, what will happen is that I'll be seeking to offset that carbon footprint that I have without an allocation of caps to different companies and institutions. then really that demand will not be as much, even if there's a supply side that is growing. For you to have the demand side to create that market, the government will need to issue caps on different institutions, companies, and firms so that there is a drive towards reducing your carbon. And one of those ways of doing it, besides having low carbon projects, is for you to offset using carbon credits. So until that happens, monetization will remain limited. But in the meantime, of course, prosumers can start to document their projects and track how much carbon emissions they're mitigating or removing from the atmosphere as a result of their project. So prosumers obviously can sell to the carbon credit, they can sell their carbon credits to local businesses and institutions when these caps are set. So I think there are also agencies. I think there are third-party independent registered agents that actually come and assess your project to ensure that they are real. Number one, the fact that it reduces emissions is measurable and it's also permanent. Once you have those third-party independent bodies to come and verify your project, then you can actually have a certificate that is tradable. But before this market is fully developed, then all I would encourage is for prosumers to keep records and get ready for that market. But it's there, and there's a voluntary market they can go to, which is international, and sell the credits.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's really important, keeping records, because I know the president recently finalized the carbon market activation policy to unlock billions of dollars in high intensity carbon credits.
Yeah.
And we're also looking at updating our NDCs, which is due, which has
Correct.
it was actually due in September. So to align more with the Paris Agreement and international, so it'll be good for prosumers to keep records. And like you said, there's already an existing voluntary market and where you can self-report as well and have your projects verified and assessed. So that is really important. Thank you so much, Rahila. This was very insightful. We would come back to you probably from participants. So we'll move over to Engineer Chibueze. Engineer Chibueze, please confirm that you are with us before I proceed.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I think you are one of the most important, because Rahila mentioned something about high entry costs for investors like yourself. So it will be interesting to get your thoughts on how this regulation impacts renewable energy developers. So in your opinion, how does the regulation ensure a balance between incentivizing private renewable energy investment and maintaining stable supply for all consumers? So how do you think it balances that private sector investment alongside stable supply, affordable tariffs for consumers?
Okay, thank you so much, Evie, and thank you, Rahila, thank you, Umar, and thank you, everyone. I think this is a very good step in the right direction. I think from what we can see, the idea here is really to democratize access, to ensure that those who have excess capacity can actually make that available for those in need of that availability. From what we can see, maybe at the immediate, it might not be all consumers, because from just listening in, we can all realize that already there is a limit to the capacity in terms of 50 kilowatt peak to 5 megawatts. However, I think in the future, if we're able to demonstrate that we have a good hold of this mechanism, I think it can then scale up to reach all consumers. But for now, I think the prosumers that will benefit, like Rahila rightly mentioned, would probably be those who look like they meet the requirements, basically the commercials, the industrials, possibly those who are also in the space of providing some sort of captive generation that have capacity that has been trapped for some time and are happy to sell that, possibly at whatever they can get it for, since the alternative might have been to not be able to sell it, and then a host of others. But I think one thing that stands out here is the fact that this regulation goes to make bold that the government is keen on seeing the proliferation of renewable energy. And this is a good signal to the investment community. I think, the key thing, like we would always like to see, is the pilot. And I'm happy that Umar mentioned that there will be need for pilots so that we can figure out on a small scale how to achieve this and then scale it up. But if it's about bringing and incentivizing private capital to flow into the space, I think this is a signal that we've been long waiting for, and we're happy that it's here. And it's something that I think through the consultations, we should all be able to make meaningful inputs, especially through, this sort of conversations that we're having with you and your team, to be able to ensure that most of what we discuss gets back to not just the national regulators, but also the state regulators.
Thank you, Chibueze, for that contribution. So, stemming from that, what opportunities and risks do you think the framework presents for investors? From an investor standpoint, because you are an investor in this space, what opportunities and risks do you think it presents? And what new opportunities do you think will exist under this system? So things like distributed solar storage or new financing models. What opportunities and risks and what new opportunities do you foresee stemming from this framework?
Okay, I would say, first of all, at the heart of it will be modernizing our grid. I think this definitely will have to force our grid to come to par with meeting the administrative and operational requirements to make this work. I think for sure that also leads to the fact that, first of all, there will be investments not just by prosumers who want to ensure that they're able to take advantage of the opportunity, but also by those who operate the national grid, as well as the distribution companies who are in their different franchise areas. And what this simply does is that it's going to ensure that as different players, as different prosumers try to inject to the grid, the discos need to do all the necessary studies, grid stabilization studies, feasibility studies to ensure that this is workable. On the one hand, it also encourages the prosumers to also do their due diligence and look at the investment opportunity, look at the risks, especially financial risk, price risk, to ensure that they can actually meet the minimum quantity they need to produce to actually make it worth the while for their supply to be put on the grid. But I also think that is actually an opportunity that ensures that maybe for once, most people that thought that power supply was something that wasn't within their hands can actually feel that power supply is something that is closer to their hands. So even if you have the capacity to invest in providing your own power supply in your own facility, you might now be incentivized to, rather than invest in a diesel power system, look at investing in a solar power system that has more capacity than you need, but also allows you to earn from selling the excess capacity to the national grid. So I see this as a good opportunity for a sort of diesel displacement program where the right incentives are there to give the right signals to people that, look, if you're able to have the capacity, then you probably have the chance to earn. Most people might not mind earning as much as they could have earned, from how much they buy it for. But the example that Rahila gave, I think it was a very good one, of Kenya, where the government has capped it at half. And I guess the point there is you might as well have gotten nothing. So how about half? But I think we can also sometimes look at the nuances so that we ensure that as we set regulations, we are confident that when we say go, people are happy to jump on it. Not that people are saying, why are we not doing net metering then if if net metering favors more than net billing. So as we go through the consultations, I think all the views need to be put in place to ensure that people are happy. But I think one thing too that is important is tariff indexation, because in Nigeria, we see what has happened with inflation over the years, foreign exchange adjustments. Are tariffs cost reflective or not cost reflective today? That is still up for debate. But how do you ensure that prosumers don't come back to feel that they have been shortchanged because maybe they were not informed about the tariff mechanisms, the multi-year tariff order, and everything that goes into making the tariffs work? So I think a bit of awareness might also be necessary so that prosumers are basically equipped with what they need to understand how they play a role in the Nigerian electricity supply industry. And I think another key thing is really, the risk of cash flows, right? Because on the one hand, you expect to be net billed, but on the other hand, the issue of credit settlement is another, because you expect to be paid. Could there be disputes that come up because, for example, a prosumer has injected power to the grid, but then the disco is saying, well, we're only selling, as we sell the power you inject, we pay you back, because we also have to pay back for the power from the grid and other sources. So what is the waterfall? Which one gets paid first? Do prosumers get the rights of first repayment before the discos payback embed? How are the discos able to segment and monitor the energy that comes from prosumers versus those that are not from the prosumers? I heard a bit about carbon credits, and I think that's exciting. So that simply means that we really need to be able to track separately the energy that is injected by these prosumers vis-a-vis the national grid energy. And then how do you also protect people from those prosumers who might actually turn on this generator, and as long as there's a meter and for some reason they think they can be smart, it's assumed that this is clean energy, whereas this is not clean energy. So when you think of the administrative and operational nuances, there is definitely a lot. And I know that the pilot would be able to allow us to throw up a lot more of the opportunities that we can learn from, but also the risks and the mitigations that we need to put in place. But I think one thing that could also help is sort of maybe like an energy settlement guarantee fund, a sort of fund that ensures that to incentivize large prosumers who want to play a key part in this market, there is some sort of fund that guarantees repayment. And maybe this fund, we could be creative with how we ensure that this payment assurance mechanism is put in place. Maybe this fund can be some sort of fund that comes from already renewable energy credits or renewable energy savings or earnings. And then that really sends the right signal to the global investment community that we are really trying to make this work, and we're just trying to figure it out, but there is some sort of backstop, some sort of guarantee that has already been put in place to give prosumers comfort that there is some intermediate funding that can make them whole while they try to ensure that the discos do their own part. And I think one other key thing might be that this also provides an opportunity for a different sort of long-term PPAs, because if you're a prosumer and you're going to a community where you have capacity to provide enough power for yourself and also export, but then you have people in the local area who could benefit from that excess, how do you ensure that to some extent, you go into some maybe PPA arrangements that ensure that you are recognized as a power producer, maybe by the regulator, and then you are allowed to institutionalize your power supply business to support those in the rural communities. When you think of interconnected mini grids, how do you want to work it out such that maybe those large prosumers could be able to provide off-peak power to interconnected mini grid providers who are in the area, while they provide on-peak power maybe during the day, and then there is a sort of balancing mechanism. So there is a lot of thinking that has to go into all the players to make this work.
Thank you so much, Chibeze. Well, you've answered almost all your questions, which is really good. I like the fact that the one key point that really stuck was, where you spoke about the injection. How do you ensure that somebody with a diesel generator? I think that's a really interesting point. And also the fund for keeping the prosumers whole. It's another interesting point you raised. And then you said something about how the allocation can be done to ensure that renewable energy developers are kept in the loop. How do you think the 30% feeder capacity cap can be implemented without stifling distributed generation growth?
I think that's a very interesting one. I know that, well, this is just to say, well, first of all, the majority should not be from this scheme. I think to some extent, the minority of the supply should be from this scheme. But then in Nigeria, there are different kinds of feeders, and different feeders have different performance ratings. Ultimately, the average Nigerian just wants to have power supply, but the challenge is the willingness and ability to pay for that becomes another problem. So even if we expect 30% as feeder injection cap, what we might end up having depends to a large extent on whether this scheme is going to work or not. I don't think we have an issue with augmenting supply to the feeders, or in the blend of the mix, having say a cap of 30% from these prosumers. I think what will also be important to understand is, the feeders that we need to feed this energy to, how well are they structured to absorb the energy and also dissipate the energy. So from an administrative point of view, how have we been able to keep record of feeder asset value, in the asset register of the discos? How do you make a fair case for charging? In this case, for example, if there was supposed to be a charge for using the feeder, is there going to be a value for that? Or are they expected to just connect to the feeder at any point? Is there an incentive for prosumers to make investments to, make feeders whole if they're not performing optimally? And could there be a fair return for that outside of the regulated tariff? Are we going to be a bit flexible with the tariff to just see how the market moves, maybe based on different sizes of prosumers, to ensure that the capacity we actually want to see comes on stream? Going forward, there's going to be a whole lot more renewables, both on grid and off grid. The question then becomes, how are we ready to adjust some of our mechanisms to fit this? And I think what this shows is that this is an example of many in one. So you have captive power, you have sub-franchising, you have interconnected mini grid, you have almost everything in this one tool. So what that simply means is we need to harmonize our regulations as well, so that as we're working on this, we don't contradict ourselves in what we say in other regulations, because then things are built and people are confused, under which regulation does this come under. From what I understand, I think the 5 megawatts is the capacity of 11 kV feeders, and 20 megawatts is supposed to be the capacity of 33 kV feeders. So as we work out what this 30% represents, I think we can also just take it to the field and look at our feeders and ask ourselves, what is realistic? Are there feeders where it might be more than 30? Are there feeders that it can be less than 30 because of certain reasons? And then in those cases, based on the different scenarios on ground, how do we put in the right incentives for the investments to be made by the prosumers? Because you might have a prosumer that has excess capacity, but for that excess capacity to be evacuated, maybe they are informed that they can only earn based on the energy they sell, not because of the investment they make to export it. And then the consumer is, and then the potential prosumer is asking themselves, if I've survived all along without getting into this, is it really worth the while the day we need to expand our capacity in our plant, and then we need that extra energy capacity, are we going to have an issue with, saying that we want to pull the plug, or are we going to then make a further investment when we actually could have as well not gone on this scheme of net billing? So I think the stakeholder engagement would need to crowd in a lot of the stakeholders that sometimes get left out in these conversations, because you would realize that the large CNIs, the diesel generator sellers are key players. If you look at the amount of energy that is generated every day, I think they are the number one energy service providers, put it that way, them and those selling diesel as a fuel. So they need to be brought into the room, and then we need to work with them to understand that, do they see how do they see themselves playing in this new sort of diesel displacement scheme that is utility scale and grid tied? What are the challenges that they will face to be part of the scheme? Because some of these people might be ready to do what they can to also kill some of these initiatives, because you're basically telling the bulk of their customers to not work with them. So the engagement needs to be broad. We need to crowd them in, but then also we need to also crowd in those who, like I heard earlier on, those who can only produce 5 kilowatts, or 10 kilowatts, because hearing this, they get excited, net billing, or there's a point in Nigeria where I'm going to be able to sell my energy, and then they are told that they are not really, this doesn't really, factor them in. I think those are the people that want to enjoy the net billing the most. But we also we also need to think of how to make sure that they are happy, because maybe there's line of sight to when potentially they could be able to participate in these schemes. Are we thinking of organized communities like estates? So if you're in an estate and then you're a registered member of the association, then maybe we can work with your association and then have you as a sort of sub prosumer. So, but those could be more exciting. We're thinking of people in Lagos who can participate in this scheme, or in Abuja. So we just need to make sure that as we go through this, we don't just fixate ourselves on numbers, because I know there was the 10%, and I think 50%, like Rahila mentioned, should come from renewables. But what might help is for us to also work out really being sure that those numbers will come to fruition, because I'm not sure most of the discos have achieved the 10% embedded, and half of that being renewables. So as we learn from some of the things that may have worked or not worked in the past, and then as we come up with ideas for some of the things we want to work in the future, let's also come from that ground up perspective, where some of the numbers and some of the points might be informed by pilots that have been done, and those have supported us to be able to be sure that the numbers will work out as planned.
Thank you so much, Chibueze. Those were very, very valuable and insightful points that you raised. I took a lot of notes from there. So we're going to now throw open the Q&A for the audience to send in their questions, or if you have a question, you can also raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak live. We have a question in the chat. How do you plan to implement the net billing? I think this will be for NERC. How do you plan to implement the net billing since it requires two-way smart meter? Umar, are you still with us? Or if Rahila can step in to take that.
Yeah, so the question is what? Sorry.
How do you plan to implement the net billing since it requires two-way smart meter?
Well, when you say, I think I'm trying to understand the question in the sense that it's a meter. So one of the requirements as a prosumer and the utility for this program to take effect, you have to buy a bidirectional meter. That's a requirement. So it has to have a functionality whereby the meter can measure imports of energy and exports of energy. That's one criteria. Without that, then there's no, you can't benefit from the system. So the how really is ensuring that you get that meter, and the expectation is that NEMSA will assess all this with the utility. The utility will do its own assessment. NEMSA will do its own assessment to ensure that the integration process is seamless and everyone can view what is imported and exported to be able to be settled accordingly.
Thank you, Riley. I think that's very clear. That answers that question. Do we have any other questions from our audience? If you have a question, you can raise your hand up to speak live, or you can put it in the chat or Q&A. We've had really insightful discussions today, and I think this has sort of made it clearer regarding the intention of the regulation in promoting renewable energy integration. So I'll just check if we have any further questions. If you have a question, you can raise your hand as well. And if there are no other questions, we would move on to the closing remarks from the speakers. I would like us to look at to give our remarks from the perspective of what do you see as the next steps in terms of the policy, the regulatory aspect. What would be the next step, and what long-term transformation could this regulation bring to Nigeria's electricity market and its global competitiveness? Because a lot of points have been raised, which are really key. I think for me, I took a lot of points regarding the fact that it's going to open up access and increase access to clean energy. But of course, we need to modernize the grid, and we also need to look at how we balance cash flow settlements as well. We have to look into the feeder capacity, and of course, we have to also look into the type of energy, how to monitor. The monitoring aspect is also key, monitoring the type of energy that will be injected, and of course, creating a fund to, as Chibueze mentioned, to incentivize prosumers. But we also need to also, as Rahila said, look at the fact that the Net Billing Framework seeks to present an equitable framework that will favor the discos and the prosumers, and also allow the prosumers to recover their investment whilst investing this framework. And then, of course, Rahila also mentioned predictability. For me, I think that's really key, because if I'm coming into a project or a sector, I would like to have full disclosure of everything that can help me with putting in place or forecasting my investment trajectory, how I'll recover my investment, my revenue, and what costs I will likely meet during the course of the project. So that's really key, and I like the fact that, Emma mentioned the centralized reporting portal, which is really key. I think it can be used, it can present itself as a useful tool that would allow information asymmetry across the different players. And like Rahila mentioned, it would be good to have as many players who will be impacted by this regulation as possible within that portal. Of course, I like the fact that there will also be automated reconciliation, which is really important. It's also good that the Commission is looking to put in place rules for cost allocation and cost recovery mechanisms for network upgrades. And also the fact that on the technical side, there are existing standards for interconnections, and even the regulation also buttresses those standards and even implements or puts forward stringent standards as well. And key to this is also working with stakeholders like NHTSA to ensure that data protection and privacy are adequately maintained. So thank you, everyone. We'll now hand over to each speaker to give their final thoughts and closing remarks before we call it a day. So I'll call on Engineer Omar to please give us his closing remark, and then Rahila, and then Chibueze. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it was it's very interesting to listen to the speakers, though it seems as if the participants understood the regulation very well. We had only one question, but it's good. And it's also a new phase or a new program, not just for the participants, but also the NERC as a whole. So we expect that a lot of people might be watching and seeing what will happen in the future. We have seen how when we introduce some other regulations, how at the early stage, all these things are like this, the hiccups and other things. And over time, we have seen the influx of not just local investors, local developers, but also international investors and international developers. This is how it happens. But one way or the other, somebody has to push the market to work. This morning, one of my colleagues is asking me, is the NERC ready? Is our system ready? Is their network ready? I said, will it ever be ready? There will never be a time where you will say, I am ready. You have to push it. Somebody has to make that push and ensure that things happen. And just as my commissioner said on Friday, that the day the regulation is signed is the day that is also due for review. So if, for instance, we sign the regulation today, it's already due for review because there are other things that has happened in the market and other things. What we also know and we have seen in other climes in other jurisdictions that you cannot achieve net zero without net billing. It's almost impossible. But during the course of our research in trying to come up with this regulation, we have seen other jurisdictions where basically you have the distribution companies becoming like system operators. I've seen a case in Australia where the disco automatically, because of the amount of energy that is exported to the grid, they basically became more like a system operator. Their work is to receive the power from point A and make sure that it moves seamlessly to point B, and which is quite good. We are looking at how these regulations, and you talked about policy, what are the incentives that government will provide. The acts already provided that government should provide incentives so that to engender the development of renewables, we have to work with the government. We have to propose incentives that can be provided by the government in order to ensure that a lot of people adopt this form of regulation, form of renewables. We have to work with financial institutions to see what kind of loans, what kind of financial packages they will provide. Already REA, ECN, they are doing a lot of work to try and get manufacturers to come into the country and develop some of these renewable systems. So we expect that, we anticipate that in due course, this is also going to reduce costs for not just the NERC, but also for the consumers as a whole. And that will eventually also impact on tariff. We have seen the figures that Rahila has given us. It looks scary, but we know that with time, these things will come down. I think Chubuz also talked about conflicts. We have looked at all our regulations, and there's basically no conflict with any of our regulations. But the way the regulations also work is that where there is conflict, there's a position where which regulations takes precedence. I think it's going to be an exciting market. We have seen, I think Raila is here, the Chibuzo himself is also here. We have seen how this thing started with the mini grids. The mini grids regulation was signed in 2016. But I think we had the first mini grid sometimes in 2018, and it didn't really pick up until sometimes in 2020. Today, we have a lot of international interest. We have a lot of interest from World Bank, from all other institutions, from developers. I think more than a quarter of the developers that we have today are international developers. So we think that this thing will move. We think that it will work. There's going to be a lot of changes. We think that over time there might be changes in the building codes to address things like how renewables are installed. So there's a lot of things that will happen. We have already started engagement with Standard Organization of Nigeria to ensure that the kind of systems that come into the country are also up to par, up to standards, to ensure that issues of fire, issues of health and safety are also addressed right from the beginning. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of things that will come to play. The signing of the regulation is just a tiny bit of it. It's less than 10% of the work that we are expected to do in the future. But as the commission doesn't work without stakeholders. Everything that we do, even this regulation before it came up, there was a stakeholder consultation that determines that net billing should be a regulation that the commission should come up at this time. So, and this is how the commission has always worked. And this is how we have also seen states engaging with stakeholders, trying to determine what is possible, what is feasible, and other things. But she was asked a lot of questions. Unfortunately, you cannot provide all the answers, but you cannot say because there are no answers, then you will not do anything. We think that we're on the right path. We will push for it, and once that has been signed, we will work with the same stakeholders to try and see how it can be implemented, lessons that will be learned, the regulations will be reviewed, will be improved, and as time goes on, this is how it will work. I also want to finally say that the consultation is happening tomorrow at Transcorp Hilton. You are invited, and I've seen a lot of participants today. A lot of people were here, so we also expect that possibly they will be at the event tomorrow. We'll also share the link for the online participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Rahila, we would love to hear from you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ivy. And, I do agree with Umar that this is going to be an exciting development for the power sector. I even feel that it might gain faster traction than the mini grid. And I say that because when you look at the distribution system or the franchise area of the discos, a lot of areas are underserved. And because they are underserved, this is a brilliant way of bridging that gap. And why it's even going to be a faster measure is because today we have 6 gigawatts of captive generation, and those are big customers, self-generating. And because of the reform that took place in the removal of the petroleum subsidies, a lot of these big consumers are putting in place hybrid models to reduce their cost of diesel. So they are integrating solar systems within their business. So what that is saying to me is that there's already existing all that capacity sitting down there in all these businesses waiting to be able to connect. And oftentimes there'll be much more than 50 kilowatt peak. So I think looking at it from that angle, I believe that the underserved market will quickly be met by this program. The other aspect is the renewable obligation that NERC has issued to the distribution companies. Again, this is to the benefit of the utilities and, of course, the consumers within that network. I think Chibeze mentioned, what if they have actually met the initial 10%? Now, like I said earlier, 390 megawatts is looking at what they're supposed to take. So that's 10% of that is 390. And half of that is 195. So for me, if you look at the numbers and you ask yourself, how do I get to 195? And 195, by the way, 195 megawatts is split according to the load allocation across the 11 distribution companies. So for me to be able to achieve 195 megawatts of renewable in my system, all I need is 39 big customers at 5 megawatt peak. That's all I need. If I get 39, I've met that requirement. If I go down to the list at 50 kilowatt peak, I need about 3,900 customers to make that happen. So the numbers are there, but the beauty of this is that there's already a supply market just sitting to connect. So that is a great opportunity. The other one is the fact that this will attract investment to upgrade and modernize the network. So for areas where you need to invest in the network for you to connect, this creates that opportunity that you can actually put in money to maybe upgrade, lengthen, strengthen, and bring about the required safety devices to be able to connect. So again, it creates the opportunity for investment to come into a network that is already, requires a lot of investment as it is. Then the final one, again, is the prosumers, like I talked about, having the opportunity to sell part of their capacity that will have been sitting idle, and they're not, so now they have an opportunity to recover it. So the 6 gigawatts, whatever percentage of that represents renewable energy, you have an opportunity to sell to the grid and get paid for that and recover your capital costs in the long run. And then you are able, with this also, you are able to drive this emission reduction targets. You're able to drive it because then now this will encourage more people to uptake renewable energy because of the benefits of reducing their carbon footprints, benefiting from the carbon credits we talk about, and then also monetizing it. So I think holistically, it will create a transformational market. I mean, it's going to have a transformational effect on the Nigerian electricity supply industry, but it's important that it is carefully implemented, it is transparent, data on this is provided, DISCO provided data, everybody is aware of the prosumers, the capacity that's coming in at what rate, and all that. So I think the more transparent the implementation of this process is, there'll be more uptake and more money will flow in that direction. So yes, it's a great time in the power sector, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this will progress. Thank you very much, Ivy, for the opportunity to speak on this laudable action that NERC has started out.
Thank you so much, Rahila. Thank you. Chiba, we'd love to hear from you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ivy, and thank you, Umar, and thank you, Rahila. You guys really, really spoke very well. You did justice to it. And I think really we're all saying the same thing. We all want Nigeria to be a better country. We want power to be much more available. Hopefully cleaner power to be much more available. And I think with that, if there's more generation kind of made available where we remove bottlenecks, or we allow for excess capacity to be made available, that definitely goes to increase generation available overall in the country. And if there's more clean energy, that's better for the environment. The more generation, definitely the cost of things should start coming down. Already we see the cost of food coming down. If this piece of regulation or policy comes out successful, definitely we would all benefit. I think one thing we need to also take note of is the potential for e-waste, waste in terms of waste from the displacements of diesel that will need to happen for this to work. Because if people need to invest in that extra capacity, definitely they might need to not have to use their generators. So what happens to those generators? How do we carefully dispose of them in an ethical way that doesn't affect the environment? I was just looking at the news today, and I saw that Lagos State is now paying for recycled waste. So there's some sort of price signal that has been put in place to encourage people to separate their waste and then ensure that their waste gets recycled. And I think this analogy can be drawn with what we're trying to do in this space, where we are now trying to say that, energy that is clean, that is renewable. Let's start making note of them on the grid in terms of, when they are being supplied by those who have capacity to supply it to those who are around them, or even supply to the grid, and then the grid takes it up and decides where it goes to. I think that's already kudos to NERC. I think that's a step in the right direction. I know that NERC over the years has really been instrumental to a lot of the innovations that we have seen in the renewable energy space, especially with putting Nigeria as the leader of mini-grid development in Africa. I see this also kind of creating a new dynamic in the space, because then it's going to ensure that energy access doesn't become something that we would say the government or the regulators haven't really tried to support. I think with the mini-grid regulation and with the net billing, it doesn't get any much better than this, and doesn't also get any much simpler than this, because what it tells you is that all efforts are on deck to ensure that those who are willing and able to get the power get it from those who are willing and able to sell the power to them, at the right price. I think one thing we also need to look at is understanding that for this to work, a lot of capacity building needs to be put in place for the prosumers, even for those who are going to be implementing this from the regulators, whether it's at the federal or at the subnational level. We need to be able to build a capacity to have the right tools to be able to develop the portal we've discussed about, settlement tool we discussed about. How do you track different connections and what type of energy is providing power to them? Rahila mentioned about the bidirectional meters, which are very important. Are we going to have to ensure that all meters being brought in now maybe have bidirectional capabilities? What happens to somebody who just got a new meter last month but has an interest in this? How do they get rid of their old meter and get a new meter? Do they get some sort of credit for meter replacement or meter upgrade? So there's a lot of mechanism that has to go into just making this work. And I think players like us are happy to support as much as possible and contribute to this discourse, whether it's today or tomorrow at the event happening at Transcorp.
Thank you so much, Chibueze. Thank you, everyone. I think for me, one of the big, and Chibueze hammered on it and has hammered on it again, is capacity building. Because, Omar made a comment that there are no questions. Is it that people really understand the regulation? For me, is that you really understand the regulation, or there are you have questions that may come up as the regulation unfolds. Because like it was mentioned, this is just the starting point for the sector. So I think capacity building is really key. Putting in place all these mechanisms and tools are really important, but if you do not have the know-how and the capacity to implement it, then you can encounter challenges. So it's really important. And like Chibueze said, yes, we're starting with the C&I, the large customers, but as the market expands, you are going to have to open up the capacity limit. And it will be important to educate the applicable prosumers. Maybe then we'll have prosumer categories. But it's important to start that process from now, so people understand what it entails from the onset, and they just, latch on or tag along at the point when, the regulation expands to capture more prosumer categories. But for me, capacity building is really key, and I'm sure NERC has that under its sleeves and is working towards that. And it's also important to engage as many stakeholders. I think Chibueze also mentioned that as possible, looping as many stakeholders as possible, because it's a framework that impacts everyone. So it's good to carry everyone along, especially those that are in the forefront of moving the sector forward. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for attending this webinar. And we hope everyone will be there. Everyone who is here will be at NERC at the consultation tomorrow. And if you can join remotely, please do so that your voices can also be carried along. Thank you, Rahila. Thank you, Chibueze.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Engineer Umar. And thank you, all the attendees. Have a good afternoon.
Bye, Chibueze.
Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, see
Bye,
you.
Umar.
Bye,
Thank you.
Umar. Bye, Ivy. Bye.
Thank you
Umar.
very
Bye.
much. Yeah, bye-bye.